The following video is concerning the state of the economy in a way that, well, you voted for this. Cue the leopards eating people's faces party getting their faces eaten. Or not. You can decide. Thanks, Obama. Or is it Biden this year? Anybody but some group. So let's move on with this. This video, this is a disclaimer and warning, talks about the economy of firearms and ammunition. If you're not aware of it, unless you collect a lot of them or just make one, most of the time a person, the majority of people, will own a very small number of firearms and either buy ammunition in small packs or in bulk to save money, and or to save money even more, they'll just buy the propellant. I did a video a long time ago about what's the cheapest ammunition, and the cheapest ammunition is, oddly enough, buying the reloading components and just making them yourself. And because of that, if you want to put in the effort of making your own measuring equipment, which was, or just buying it used, you could make extremely high precision, high accuracy ammunition for target shooting, hunting, and yes, this is a rather important thing, for consistent point of aim equals point of impact methodology for truing up your ammunition and firearm and making them tuned for each other so that you could, for self-defense purposes, accurately hit what you're aiming at and accurately miss what you don't want to hit. Now, this isn't like some silly joke where people use a gun to turn on switches or you know, do other stuff like you might have seen in a BBC video and all that, joking about Americans being obsessed with firearms. This is about, you know, making this both cheap and safer. And yes, I include people making their own firearms in that previous video because it's not illegal in the United States as long as you keep it within reason and follow the regulations. And honestly, the least regulated firearm is very closely related. You build a firearm that does not take cased ammunition. You build a muzzle-loading type firearm, which means you have a hunk of pipe, a plug in the back, you put the primer in the back, and you load the gun like it's the ammunition by putting propellant in, then the projectile, and that's it. That takes time. It takes as long as it takes to load one of these things, or much longer, actually. But you do end up with something that's absolutely not regulated. Okay, so this video is about the change since then. I'll try to find my video on this and the cost, but back then the breakdown was 9mm, 22 caliber rimfire, and shotgun shells being the dominant thing. And I included all of the others, and I haven't looked back on it. But the thing I wanted to touch on was that at the time, centerfire 22 caliber 223 5.56 ammunition and others were also very, very cheap. Now, I did a breakdown rather simply then and now. I went to more than one website, but what I found is a specific website that literally talks about just showing you the cheapest sources for everything. Tools, parts, guns, ammo. Was basically the same as everywhere else because it was a meta search engine for sources. It's a clearinghouse website where you order all of the others I looked up through it. And I will include archived links below that go ahead and show examples. Basically, you just go to the website and sort all ammunition by price tag and see what is sold. So we're going to start with the cartridges that are cheapest in order of how they showed up when I looked them up. And there's a big surprise down near the bottom. Now, we're going to be including bulk prices and your reasonable handful of cartridges in a box sizes. Starting with 22 long rifle winning. 22 long rifle 36 grain cartridges, which are half the mass of what is considered the original load for 22. If you're not aware of it, we use smokeless powder these days as a species. Back then, when the 22 long rifle and a lot of these cartridges came out, they used gunpowder. Gunpowder has 1/6 the power in it, so all that case space could be just filled in with 1/6 the volume of, or 1/6 the mass, the weight, of smokeless powder. And 22 long rifle being a compromise example, right at the point we were getting smokeless powder very popular, ended up being a nice sweet spot for most people. But anyway, the 36 grain bullet being lighter means it comes out faster. If you're not aware of it, in ballistics, a projectile flying twice as fast has more than twice the amount of energy for the same velocity between them. But a twofold increase is if you use the same amount of propellant, it usually goes much faster and hits much harder by just downgrading the mass of it. It also creates a flat trajectory to where point of aim and point of impact are almost identical. And as I said, if you load your own ammunition or reload it, you can make that very consistent. It won't be ideal, but you can get them very close to each other, which is much more important than how far off it is and how much of an adjustment you have to do based on drop. Because the more consistent it is and predictable it is, the more likely you are to actually hit what you're aiming at, whether it be a target, food, or an opponent, and the more likely you are to miss anything you're trying not to harm. So let's move on. 22 long rifle, then 22 magnum, then 22 blanks. Interpret that how you will. Then we get, for some reason, 17 HMR, otherwise known as the pellet gun from hell. It's a 22 rimfire cartridge neck down to do basically a fancy looking 17 caliber pellet gun projectile. By the way, if you buy the projectiles themselves, they're often used in pellet guns because they kind of work, or they don't. The next is the one I picked as your best bet at the time, which now maybe not, 9mm. These are the 125 and 117 grain 9mm. Now, to review on the weight, 22 long rifle, 36 grain. The Magnum 22 WMR are 40 grain. The blanks are 0. The 17 HMRs are all 17 grain. That seems to be pretty standard for the low end. Then 9mm, you go all the way up to 120, 115 grain, basically 120 grain, 110 grain kind of sizes. And the next level was almost an identical grain weight between bulk and non-bulk, 40 Smith & Wesson. Oh, Smith & Wesson, I'm sorry. But you get the idea. I keep wanting to think of salt. But anyway, but those are 40. I'd put it in as 400 just to make it fit the spacing, but I'll put it back. And the next one up from that was 380 ACP. And then finally, shotgun shells show up. Now, at this point, I'm going to call it the 729 2 3/4 or 275. This goes from like the 180 grain Smith & Wesson and the 95 380 ACP to 492 grains because it's a 12 gauge. That's 729, 72.9 caliber. 2 3/4 generic, the most common thing on the planet. No one blinks at it. Yeah, it's a target load. You make waxed slugs at that point so that you get a slug, or just melt it into a slug, put it back in. 1 1/8 ounce. These are the standard, used to be called 3 dram loads. They're bog standard for shotguns. I didn't go beyond that point, but the 20 gauges followed right after it with a minimal price change. Then we get to finally the 223 5.56 55 grain Remington. And these are reloads. Yes, this is a sign of the times. Thanks, Obama. Oh, wait a minute. Who's running things? Reloaded ammunition was very prominently happening at this point. And then 230 grain, which are much bigger, 45 ACP cartridges, which are bordering on the heaviest ones. 45 ACP for, quote-unquote, the 2 World Wars 45 ACP-based handguns, the 1911. Old fart guns. Now, this is a mix of bulk versus individual packet sizes being almost identical. And I mean, when I say identical, I mean literally the 500-round pack for one of them and the 50-round pack were valued at a 10-to-1 ratio. It's just a box with 10 boxes in it. They're not even doing anything with them. They're just like, yeah, there's no bulk rate improvement. That did not, however, hold true when you go from 555 rounds to 5,550 rounds. You do get a discount on 22 long rifle. But for the 22 Magnum, I'm not sure there's much of an improvement there. The 17 HMR, for instance, you're better off just buying the small packs and spending $130 on it instead of $150 if you buy 10 packs as a box. Yeah, someone's gouging in reverse here. So anyway, why am I doing this video? Now, this isn't about ammunition or sales. The links will be to a Imager archive. You'll have to look it up from there, and those will also be archives. The reason for this is twofold. Number one, I'm not trying to promote sales of ammunition. I'm in favor of people buying ammunition components, making a muzzle loader or buying one, and just using that. You can buy 50 caliber ammunition reloading components and safely load a 50 caliber muzzle loader, which is what I suggested in a previous video, because at the time that was the most bizarrely cheap round you could do, because it would, and it's a 50 cal, and you're using smokeless powder, which is at pressure safe in muzzle loaders at the time. I know that sounds like a safety violation, but it isn't. You load it to the PSI rating of the gun, not anything else. And 50 caliber at the time, 50 caliber muzzle loaders were becoming much more popular, simply because you could just buy the components. They were for 500 Magnum, and you just load them below Magnum rating. They were quote-unquote 500 Magnum target loads, which means they just plink a target 50 feet away. But that would work fine, and it was massively cheaper. Even if you loaded them up to pressures where you'd have to get a proper barrel for handling it, it was still cheaper all around. And my conclusion, other than that, was go buy a plinking gun, 22 long rifle, one of those little daisy toy ones, bolt action, that nobody even looks twice at. That, you know, it's got a 1 mile range for accidentally hitting things, but it's got a 100 or 200 yard range for accurately hitting things, and it's just fine. Everything at the time was still cheap, and $30 for 500 plus rounds is pretty hard to beat. And that continues all the way down to 9mm for $13, getting 50 rounds. And you get the idea. You end up with some pretty crazy pricing depending on what's popular. But per round, that was the price breakdown. 22 mag, 17 HMR for some blasted reason, 9mm, 40 Smith & Wesson, 380 ACP. Then, finally, the 12 gauges entered the chat at 73 caliber. And then 223, 556, and I didn't see 7.62 or any 30 calibers after that point, and then 45 ACP. At that point, I stopped looking it up. Obviously, you'll have different prices. But the point is that for, $14, you get 50 rounds of 40 Smith & Wesson, load up a handgun, and that would be about what most people would use in a year just for target practice, and hopefully never do anything more than that for self-defense, because that's kind of the point. The majority of people who buy a gun don't ever use it to defend themselves or anything other than target practice and to maintain things. That used to be the way it was even for police. But this time, I'm looking it up, by the time I got to 223, the cheapest stuff, the stuff that was available and was going, was reloads, where people took empty ammunition from some place, and instead of scrapping the metal, they went to the trouble at site, because legal regulations and stuff, to get all the primers out, just in case they hadn't been fired somehow, and reload them. Because reloading ammunition is always, at the time, is almost always cheaper than buying it scratch, except, and this was the point of the video, 9mm was cheaper to buy it than to reload it, which was really weird. That means it was being sold technically below cost, but it's below retail cost. Interesting. Now, your cheapest bet is reloaded ammunition or just buying the venerated 22 rimfire. And no, I'm not promoting violence or even telling you, I mention prices just for comparison here. And I will not have a link that goes directly or indirectly to it. It will go to an Imager link with my sources underneath it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. It's just a sign of the economy, right? And again, thanks, Obama.